And very welcome to the Racing Room with AK Bets as we continue to hang on every word from Seven Barrels about the welfare or not of Constitution Hill. According to the latest statement released late last night, the horse very much enjoyed Arsenal and Liverpool's 2-2 draw in the Premier League over a few cans of Scrumpy Jack, but he didn't much care for Coronation Street as he struggled to follow the plot. I'm starting to lose the plot with all these meaningless updates, but lucky for me, I have the wonderful company of Tony Calvin, Harry Stewart Moore, and Anthony AK Bets Cominces to keep me down to earth. How are you doing, gentlemen? All good? Everybody happy?
Yeah, very well. Pleased to see those guys. Yeah,
just got my two little pals here along here, and much of the rumor mill going crazy last night. I even got a little turn on Racing Creeps, which I've been trying to get into for ages. But these guys are just the dog toys. I know that people say they're part of a board game, TC, but my dog likes these toys. That's all they do. They don't go near me or any other part of me. Okay, just as long as we're clear.
These intros are getting better and better.
We're in racing royalty now. Now you're a racing creep, you.
Yeah. I think Nicky Henderson, did you ever see the episode of The Simpsons where Homer is trying to follow in the footsteps of Thomas Edison and he comes up with these new inventions and he comes up with the everything's okay alarm. This will sound every 5 seconds, brr, as long as everything is okay. Brr. Like, what the hell are we doing with all these updates?
That's very good.
Oh, Christ. Anyone tired of the updates and Constitute? TC, you must be kind of, do you even read them anymore? Come on. I mean, Christ, the horse is fine, we get it. Put him on a feckin' race course and let's see how he is.
Yeah, it's like it's a bit bizarre, isn't it? But at least Newbury didn't have a film crew to contend with, did they? And 700 race girls. But yeah, it's getting a bit silly and we're not even into November yet.
Yeah, Racecourse Gallop next week. Can't wait for that and the 48 updates that follow every stride that he manages to take on the course. Christ almighty, just give me the puke bucket. Anyway, Shark Hanlon, a couple of bit of business to tidy up here. I might get your thoughts on this one, Harry, if you don't mind. Look, he had his sentence, if you like, his punishment reduced on appeal, and it looks like he'll probably be out of action for around about 3 months, starting in December, which will bring him back for Cheltenham. Do you think, all told, that the right decision has finally been arrived upon here?
Well, I still don't think that it was a banning offence myself. If what we're told about it is what happened, if it's about a tarpaulin slipping, the whole thing just seems very heavy-handed. But I don't want to repeat myself. We've talked about this before. The caveat is there was discussion about whether he was fully open with the panel at some point. Or the investigation, and so perhaps this was made worse by his conduct afterwards. But on the face of it, shutting down a yard for 1 month is a very dangerous game to be playing with. Any business really to keep, for them to keep going. So I don't think the BHA would have done it. I think the modern BHA panel post Quinlan is much more alive to the problems that people in racing are face, if you just knock them out of the game for periods of time. So I still think it was an unfortunate decision and perhaps unfortunate timing, given that they seem to be they were in negotiations with the Irish government over their share of whatever it is they're paid in Ireland. And this TV programme that had come out, I think if he'd done it at another time, it might not have come down so heavily on him.
Yeah, I guess the unfortunate thing for him is he had to proceed with the sale of his horses as well. So, look, I don't know how much of that he was bothered by or not. I think maybe it's a chance for him to clean house a little bit and get rid of some of the horses, and he can maybe start anew. I'm not too concerned about that, maybe as other people are.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. It was quite odd timing if he was very concerned about it. I mean, it was almost the day before the appeal, wasn't it? The sales. So it was quite odd timing if it really was all being thrust upon him.
Fair enough. AK, how was your week trading wise? Did you take a lot of money on Cheltenham to redeem your view of the state of horse racing at the moment? Now that the jumps are back, are you more positive, or was it a bit of a quiet one?
No, it's been very good the last week, just in general on the site. Turnover continues to rise. We were only talking in the office. We had our highest bet count day ever on Friday, and then on Saturday we beat that number by 20%. So I have no idea what's going on. Need to dig into it a little bit. But
well, I can tell you what's going on. You're starting to feel the effects of Calvin, Stewart Moore, and Cal coming back to pay you nicely for your investment. That's what's happening. That's what's happening here.
That'll be it. But all is rosy. be interesting. Just the next thing I suppose on the agenda would be the UK government's budget. I think it's the 30th of October. So that'll be
Wednesday.
Yeah, the roadblocks and the hills to jump over in the foreseeable future. Anyway, so let's see what happens there, and I can give you my thoughts on that next.
Well,
month.
I can tell you straight off the bat, your little crusade to try and garner some sympathy from the public about how expensive it is to lay horses these days hasn't washed with the public, because according to the latest screenshot about how should the Labour government plug this billion dollar deficit that they have, the answer is to tax the hell out of bookmakers. AK, your appeals are falling on deaf ears.
No, 100%. Like for me, it's just interesting that the old phrase, "You never see a poor bookmaker," but the people who come up with that phrase have never seen survivorship bias as well. So the bookmakers that survive are the ones that tend to do it right, or as right as possible. Yeah, like I can see why people maybe don't like gambling, and it's an easy thing to tax. But I think just down the line, when you've got someone to blame for skyrocketing problem gambling rates, it's not going to be bookmakers the next time.
To be fair, do you think, as I probably do, that like that maybe the public are not joining the lines, and even racing fans are not joining the lines between tax the bookmakers on their profits versus the potential damage this might do to the industry as a whole?
It's just my opinion on it is it's just an unbelievably highly regulated industry now. It's not like people are struggling to, like 10 years ago, you'd be able to find problem gambling stories and bookmaker behavior that wouldn't be acceptable. These days, they were 10 a penny. They're a lot less rare. They're a lot less common now. And yeah, I think people just haven't cottoned on to the fact that this is an unbelievably highly regulated. We can disagree with some of the regulation, which we do and we discuss on here as well, but it's unbelievably highly regulated now. And I think the issues that gambling and people that gamble are going to face are going to be experienced outside of the regulated market going forward. And I'm sure that bookmakers will probably be the first to get blamed for that if it all goes wrong. But anything you're
looking forward to in the budget, TC? If they subsidise Turkey travel for the old hair pants man, you might give it a thought, would you?
No, I'm not doing the teeth and the hair journey to Turkey. Thanks very much. No, coming back to that, you mentioned the poll. I mean, I was watching Trevor Phillips' program on Sky on Sunday morning, and that poll came up. There was 74% net support for increasing tax on gambling companies. It's the most popular public support for any potential tax rises, and it was far and away the biggest at 74%. That's worrying, isn't it? It shows.
Yeah, if you want to dig into that as well, you asked that 74% what the current tax rates are, and they won't have a clue. It's just a populist answer.
Yes,
like, it's very, very frustrating when stuff like this gets rolled out. All those people can tell you what bookmakers are taxed for what products now. So it's just very easy. Gambling's a bit bad. Let's tax that. That's all this is.
Yeah, it was like, so just reading them out: 74% levy on gambling, 60% levy on tobacco, 60% raised stamp duty on share buybacks, 18% capital tax relief on pension contributions, and only 2% on alcohol duty. You
would have thought that. I think some people will struggle to understand what some of those options even are, and gambling just sticks out as a very obvious one there, doesn't it? The way that we do things by polls nowadays is very troubling. Polling is a real science, and you can't just use raw data. You have to have very skilled people to then analyze that raw data. And too often, rather like this, people are now anti-whip and worried about welfare. Too often, people just go out and ask a question. No one's told who they asked. And we start to make policies on the basis of the back of these polls. It's not a sensible way of making policy.
And Harry, to add one further, I mean, the question in these polls are hugely significant here. Like, if you go out and ask the public, like, how do you want to plug the financial deficit? A, tax the bookmakers, or B, tax yourself. Like, you're gonna, you know what I mean? It's very specific here. Like
exactly. And the other thing is, when you're asking these questions, one of the things you have to take into account is how strong are these people's opinions? And you can't ask them that question. You can't say, do you agree strongly, disagree? We don't know if these people have ever asked themselves these questions before, or whether it's the first time that the questions even occurred to them. that's a very important part of analysing the strength of the results of the poll. And again, yeah, we've got to stop this thing of going out and just asking people and thinking that because pollsters generally get it right in politics, then it can apply to everything else. The polling in politics is unbelievably complicated, and it's only got good because it's been done over so many years. It tells you nothing. These polls tell you absolutely nothing.
As the comedian George Carlin said, think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize that half of them are more stupid than that. So
yeah, exactly. What was Ricky Gervais' idea? Take the warning signs off the bottles of bleach, and that'll boost the intelligence. But just take off the warning labels. Oh, bleach, lovely, right? Now off you go. Get rid of these people.
Love it.
Have you taken much money on the US elections, by the way? We're getting off politics, I promise, in a second. Have you taken much money off the US elections? Because I'm convinced Kamala Harris is the wrong price here. You have Trump in his favor, which is ridiculous. He's not going to win. There's no way he can win.
It's absolutely off the charts. The turnover we're doing on it is really, really good. It's going to be our highest turnover event ever, is what it's tracking as. It's unlike Irish politics or UK politics, where UK has been slightly different, where recent general elections have been pretty lopsided. You kind of knew who was going to win going into them. The thing with the American elections is they're not far off 50-50 most of the time. And and when you've got two ends of the spectrum in a battle, everybody has an opinion on it, which helps from a laying a bet point of view as well. So turnover's off the charts. Like it's going to be our highest turnover event, like I say, and we're betting it very, very hard. Top price both candidates, and just flipping a coin essentially and seeing what happens. But yeah, if you're having a bet on the US
given the size of that market, AK, given that politics is not exactly your speciality area, do you feel particularly nervous about these markets, or is it no different to anything else?
No different to anything else, to be honest with you. Happy. It's just interesting from us. These are kind of events where we like to go. Let's be best price, both options in the market. If someone's having a bet, you kind of want them to have it with you. We're laying more bets on Kamala Harris. We're laying bigger bets on Trump. So there are less bets on Trump, but the people that are betting Trump are betting to much larger figures. So Trump is the loser in the book, and I think he will be on the off as well.
Talking about Trump here, he famously said drink bleach during the COVID crisis.
There you go. And most of his mass support were wiped out overnight. Yeah, I think they have it all wrong. I think Harris is going to walk this. But anyway, sure, what do I know? What do I know about US politics? Not a lot, as they say. What do you think about is worse, TC? If I said to you, which would you prefer? Someone to come up and smack you on the mouth, or to spit in your face? Which is the worst thing that I can offend you with? To punch you or to spit on you?
Oh, spitting is.
I'm not talking about your sex life here, by the way. Just guy comes up and decides.
I'm not going to go down the road and say what's the spitting on. No, spitting 100%, isn't it? You don't.
Yeah, and the reason I mention this is obviously Evangelos Marinakis, the owner of Nottingham Forest. He's picked up a 5-match ban for spitting in the direction of the referees, apparently. And obviously, all this money that Kia Drabshin has been pouring into racing, and this guy is pretty heavily involved on the big hitting side of things.
I did look into that. Apparently, he hasn't officially bought into Ammo Racing, and he didn't buy. I thought he actually did partner up with him at the recent Newmarket sales, but it doesn't sound like he's officially on the sales list. So yeah, it's it just caught my eye, and it just shows you how different racing kind of like journalists are to a football journalist. He got a 5-match ban for that spitting in front of the ref after his team got a penalty awarded against them when they lost to Fulham. And some journalists went after him, said he shouldn't have got a 5-match ban. He should have got a 5-month ban. So yeah, it's
unconfirmed reports that Marinakis has been brought into Ammo Racing purely just to fire the jockeys by spitting on them. So I don't know if that's true or not, but we'll wait and see what happens. Hey, Rossa,
I'll let you to take on a Greek billionaire. So yeah, you're on your own there.
Rossa, you're out of here. Good luck. Right. Let's talk about the racing from the weekend. So Cheltenham was on. I thought it was interesting, TC. So the highest attendance on Saturday for Cheltenham at this meeting at this time of year would suggest to me that people are dying to get back into the jumps. I mean, it's a positive attendance story, isn't it, for one?
Yeah. there's two good news, actually. We shouldn't have any place on this podcast, really. But yeah, Cheltenham October meeting attendance was up massively, helped
Right.
by 5,000 of your students attending on the Saturday.
Right.
Spinning
Yeah, so that's
around.
very good news. And news out from the levy board this morning, Monday morning. The average attendance figures in the third quarter were up. The actual number of attendance were down, but the fixtures were far fewer. So that's a positive story as well. So
Okay.
positive stories there. So yeah, Cheltenham very happy, making a big noise about it. But yeah, I mean the numbers, they got over 20,000 there on the Saturday. So yeah, very good news for Cheltenham.
No, excellent. It was great, and it was great to see as well. And it did whet the appetite as such for the old jumps, which is coming back thick and strong. We do have some talking points to go to from the weekend. The first, I guess, we go back to Friday, TC, and Harry Skelton. So for anyone who remembers, Val Grand was miles and miles clear, turning for home. Race was put to bed. Very good performance from the horse, but Skelton did see fit for whatever reason to give the horse 3 belts of the old pro stick. When he was miles clear and always going to win the race. And this kind of raised a few eyebrows here. Do you think he might have a case to answer for? Do you think he might have to face some sort of punishment for this, or how do you see it?
Yeah, first things first, I don't know if ITV or Racing TV covered this. I did ask on Twitter and I didn't get a satisfactory response or a definitive response. But given that Alice Plunkett, who was the roving reporter on ITV, was actually holding Harry Skelton's kid when he came into the weighing room, I don't think she was going to question him about the 3 strikes and the whip of running.
Right.
He was like, and you know, there's a wider argument about here. We talked about, you know, the racing versus the football press. You know, it's kind of like disappointing if, you know, Tom Scudamore and Mick Fitzgerald on ITV and Ollie Bell didn't mention that, but I don't know if they did or not. So we'll put that to one side. But okay. He was miles clear on Val Grand. And when I say miles clear, he was probably a distance clear, 30 lengths plus clear on the running. And he gave it a marked strike, the first one, presumably to try and keep it straight. And then he gave it 2 more. Like I say, and as far as I'm aware, when the whip review committee sit on Tuesday, I think he could be in real trouble here because, you know, if we talk about the optics of, you know, we won't go into the Alphonse Legrand, but if we're talking about the optics of 10 strikes in the heat of battle over the last 2 furlongs, as you know, and 3 strikes here, really visible strikes when he's miles clear, I think he's got to be in trouble here. I question the fact that it wasn't in the stewards report. And then Paul Struthers got in touch with me and said, no, all whip offences never appear in the stewards report anymore. They go straight to the whip review committee on the Tuesday. So I think he could be in for some bad news. I'm not sure what punishment, if any, he can expect to receive. But, you know, like I said, if we talk about optics with the whip.
Yeah, this is my problem, Harry. I don't have an issue with what he did, I have to say. You know, like we give out enough about jockeys not riding to a finish, and then they get caught in the line, and people are up in arms saying you got to ride out to the finish. I know it wasn't necessary, but like if we all accept, I think as most common sense people do, that the horse doesn't feel any pain whatsoever from 3 strikes of a pro push, right? I've no issue with what he did, but against the rules, do you think he's in trouble here, Harry?
Yeah. I think you've got to, you know, put aside what you think about welfare in a situation like this, because it's just a breach of the rule. Well, it seems to me to be a breach of the rules. Now, he may have reasons as to why he needed to deploy the whip. It looks to me like he doesn't look behind him until shortly after he deploys it the 3rd time, and then he rather realizes how far he is ahead and stands up in his stirrups. But I suppose the interesting thing, and again, this might be more one Paul Struthers can help us with if he feels like getting in touch again, is it seems now that Skelton won't have the opportunity to give any explanation as to his ride, because it just now goes to the whip review committee, who do it on the basis of the videos, which does, you know, it's not the way that sports jurisdiction is moving. It's supposed to be all a little bit more done in the open. Now, yes, he has the right of appeal. It does potentially seem to me this whip review committee might be a bit of a step backwards if this is really how it works, which is that basically there isn't a steward's inquiry into the use of the whip. So
is this to keep it out of the press on the day and keep the animal rights mob off the mark?
Well, but who knows? For whatever reason, the BHA, and I think Brad Dunchy said the other day, have made the decision and are very keen to deal with whip offences, you know, not on the day, not on a Saturday, on a Monday and Tuesday morning. But it does seem to me that there are various problems with that, and one of which does seem to be that it's kind of a hearing held in camera, which is just basically in a room without more than in camera, because you're not entitled to go and make any representations at it. Now, yes, you do have the right to appeal that, but it's quite a lengthy process. If this is how it works, maybe there's more to it. Maybe you are entitled. I'm not sure. I couldn't see that you are entitled to make representations to the whip committee, but yeah, it is a bit odd and frankly potentially even a bit wasteful that we go. You have a stewards inquiry that doesn't deal with it, then goes to a whip review committee panel that watches it but doesn't speak to anyone, and then an appeal in front of the disciplinary panel of the BHA. It does seem rather long-winded.
I think it's pretty obvious that he was trying to correct a drift to the stands rail, but that's the kind of thing that could have been dealt with in the stewards report. I mean, there's no doubt that he hit it 3 times 1 miles clear, and he could have given his reasons there. It could have been dealt with on the day. Like I said, I think it's to stop the likes of ITV highlighting this and having to tell the story, but it just prolongs it. What could be dealt with in 20 minutes is now 4 days long, isn't it? So
what about B. O'Neill's point on
backfires? Sorry, Hugh, that backfires as well, because if you actually get someone with a brain watching racing that's anti, then they're going to spot that a mile off, and it's much worse to be the sport to be seen to be trying to hide these things than dealing with them on the day.
Yeah, fair enough. And just to point out B. O'Neill's tweet, which you highlighted, TC, about the continuing tail of jump jockey is more of a concern. It's rarely pointed out and was again very evident in Cheltenham yesterday, as it will be today. When will they red flag them on track? It works for eventing. So this is the horse that should be pulled up and that's way off the back, but probably isn't.
Yeah, I mean the guy is I think he's a retired equine physio. I thought that was an excellent point. He did point out that Nico de Boinville did exactly the right thing on Arclight when that horse wasn't jumping, and he did also point out that a jockey recently got 10 days for not pulling up a horse in a very timely manner as well. I think it might have been Cameron Isles, but don't hold me to that. But I think he highlighted that case. I just thought it was a very, very good point, where that is a bigger welfare issue, and like you said, if a horse is, even if you suspect it of being lame, you should pull it up immediately, and that is clearly a bigger welfare issue.
It is a bigger welfare issue, but surely it's got to ultimately be the responsibility of the jockey on the horse to make that call. I'm not mad about this idea of people off the track waving flags and taking the responsibility onto them to decide whether a horse they're not riding needs to be pulled up, and taking it away from the jockey, and frankly giving everyone another opportunity to have a go at the BHA getting everything wrong. I wouldn't be too keen on that.
Totally agree. The jockey knows better than anybody how the horses before.
Yeah.
I'd say that. Totally agree with that. While we're on Cheltenham, TC, before we move over to the flat for a couple, a lot of interest, obviously, yesterday at Cheltenham. Paul Nicholls, stage star. God, there seems to be a real problem with the Nicholls yard at the moment. They're just not performing as you might expect. But Ahoy Senor attracted a lot of negative attention for the ride he got yesterday. And a lot of punters on Twitter, and we're trying to be a voice for punters here, saying, look, the horse clearly wasn't out to win this race. It clearly had another day in mind. Why do you not say so beforehand if you're just giving him a racecourse gallop around to get him fit for the next day? He never was in a position to win. He flew home late. Probably could have won the race doing handstands if he was put in a better position. And the whole thing just didn't look particularly well. ITV did deal with this afterwards with Tom Scudamore and Ollie Bell, but Scudamore understandably stuck up for the yard and for the horse and for his previous record. But what was your overall take on it?
I preface this by saying I didn't watch any racing live yesterday, but I came to this yesterday afternoon. I saw the ride and it was unsatisfactory, we'll put it like that. I think it probably, on another day, I think Derek Fox, he has got a very quiet riding style, as we've seen with the Grand National winner. And it was his first start back. The horse is very inconsistent. They wanted to get a good first run in the campaign, which he hasn't done previously. So from the connections point of view, perfect first ride. a perfect first comeback run.
If you back the horse, TC,
but if you know, but that's what I was going to do. If you back the horse, you will be doing you'll be very hard done by. Now, the stewards did look into this. There was a lengthy statement. Lucinda, basically, in these circumstances, if the trainer comes out, Lucinda Russell in this case, said, no, I'm happy with the ride, road to instructions, and all what happens then, nearly 100% of the time, is explanations were noted by the stewards. Therefore, they didn't do anything. They just said, right, we'll note these, and that's pretty much done with it. But fair play to ITV Racing. Ollie Bell obviously brought the question up, questioned Mick Fitzgerald and Tom Scudamore. Fitzgerald, from the 2-minute clip I saw, I didn't see it live. Fitzgerald pretty much stayed silent on it, but obviously Tom Scudamore is the son of Peter Scudamore, who trains with Lucinda Russell, the horse's official trainer. But Peter Scudamore is basically their joint training partnership. So it is awkward for Tom Scudamore. And it comes back to what we mentioned before about our kind of like analysts, a lot of them who are previous jockeys, are they too close to it? And Tom Scudamore did his best to put both sides of the case there. And he did admit it looks bad. And he said, Derek Fox, if he had the opportunity again with hindsight, he would have pressed the button a lot earlier. And the horse was only beaten a length and a half. And the horse has made the running before as well. And he was dropped out last. So yeah, it was bad. But the thing that really struck me is a lot of people were saying, well done ITV for highlighting this. I mean, these are the kind of things that should be highlighted all of the time. It just struck me as everyone's praising ITV, which they should do. Ellie did a good job here. It just struck me as, this should be the norm. We should be questioning these rides all the time. And just because it was a one-off, people praising ITV, they should be doing this all the time. And it just struck me as a wider issue. I mean, I don't know what the situation is with you and RTE over there. I mean, they're all like, a lot of these pundits on, all the mainstream channels are ex-jockeys, and they're all, they're friends, they're related, to people, to trainers, etc. And it does make it very hard for these pundits, past jockeys, to actually get stuck in and tell it as it is. You obviously have that problem over there, isn't it?
Well, yeah, the mainstay of our national hunt jumps would be Barry Geraghty, Ruby Walsh, Davy Russell, Jane Mangan, Andrew McNamara. I mean, they're all ex-jockeys, right? So, generally, I'm the voice of the punters, TC, which leaves them in a world of shit if they're relying on me to come in and express the view of what's going on the track. But I guess from that point of view, I mean, I can understand some of the frustration. I do think it's up to we can't forgive ex-jockeys for not spotting something that's blatant and should be called out. I don't think we should be making allowances for the fact that they might have connections here. It's their job on television as a paid analyst to talk about what's happened and what they see. And I think fair play to ITV yesterday for doing it. And it made interesting television with Scudamore. I know he's probably uncomfortable. He gave a good account of himself, to be fair. He gave a very good account of himself. But at least they asked the question, and you can do no more than that. I think that's my own view, But
I totally agree.
Do be the ones in Ireland, Hugh, that are more defensive in that case. Like whenever I see Ruby seems to tell it as it is. I like listening to Ruby most of the time, even if it can be awkward with Mullins and bits and pieces like that. He tells it like it is. Some of the others less so.
Yeah, well, look, and that's it. And it comes down to personality as well. I think some of them, some analysts will play it a certain way because that is their nature, and the person, and they're not there to be confrontational as such. But I guess, look, you can pick parts from different people, and you're never going to get a perfect world here. We have a question about Meg Nichols, by the way, which we'll come back to a little bit later on, just on pundits, but that's in the question time. And before we leave the racing, TC, and we've gone on a bit now, a couple of flat results. Via Sistina, holy crap, very impressive down in Australia, particularly after her antics 3 or 4 days previous to the race, where she went all over the place. And also we should mention hot as hell for Jessica Harrington in the Futurity, which was fancied a lot, but the price was quite big.
Yeah, quite a few big drifters this weekend. That was one, hot as hell. What else we got? Someone mentioned the fact that the Irish won 6 races at Cheltenham over the meeting there. So we had a question on that
Yeah.
About should we be getting worried? The answer is yes.
Even at this early stage, would you be? I mean, I know Paul Nicholls. I mentioned him, TC. But do you think this is a sign of things to come, or do you think, look, maybe it's a bit early in the season to be jumping to these kind of conclusions?
I do. If the Irish come over, I think they're going to be winning a lot of races. I know that's stating the bleeding obvious, but yeah, I wouldn't be worried about Paul. Or even though I did point out in my column on Saturday, it's the first time I've ever seen Paul Nicholls not have a runner on a big Saturday.
On Saturday, yeah, amazing.
Didn't even have a runner. But yeah, they're not going badly. I would say they're fair rather than in poor form. But he'll pick his battles, and he obviously they could be a bit behind as well. Yeah, there was a couple of grade Group 1 winners for Joseph O'Brien and Aidan O'Brien on Sunday in France.
Twain was very good.
Well, Twain was a 28-1 shot 8 days ago when winning his maiden, and he goes and wins a Group 1, like you said, less than just over a week later, which is staggering, really. What are you nodding there because you backed it?
No, I didn't back him, but I watched the race last week in the maiden, and I just thought, geez, he looked all right. And then I didn't think he was going to run this weekend. I mean, like they entered him, and I thought he's going to pull him, he's going to pull him, he's going to pull him. Then they declared him. I was like, well, Christ, I was looking at him and I was kind of, but no, I didn't back him in the end. But then I saw him win. I said, Christ almighty.
I get a bit of stick from saying the likes of Mullins and Aidan O'Brien is half a numbers game. They've got so many horses.
I know.
It just shows you they didn't know what they had with Twain, a Group 1 winner, who 8 days previously went off 28.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was that. What else did I want to mention? Via Sistina, like I said, that was unbelievable. Broke Winks' track record by a couple of lengths. And
also John Wade passed away, TC, at the age of 80, and I know he was a big national punt.
We had 2 questions on this, wanted to mention it. Yeah, he's a stalwart of the national hunt racing scene. He died at 80. We're getting a lot of these owners dying recently, aren't we? But yeah, he goes back to the Arthur Stevenson days. He was a big supporter of Rebecca Menzies. And a couple of people just asked us to flag it up because he was big noise in the north.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, good stuff. That's the racing wrap from the weekend, the last 3 or 4 days, and there was a good bit to get through there in terms of headline stuff. So, well done, TC. Okay, right. What about MGM? Bet MGM sponsoring the Queen Mother Champion Chase. Tony, just you can start us off here if you don't mind with this one, because this was announced, and generally when you get a big name sponsor for big race at Cheltenham, and it turns out they're going to sponsor more throughout the season, it's generally a positive news story. So why did this get an awful lot of backlash, do you think, from punters and people?
I don't know really, because I do know, but how am I going to put this? Put it this way: every single bookmaker has been in this kind of boat that MGM have been in, because no bookmaker are exempt from criticism when it comes to, as these podcasts have shown. But MGM, I mean, the actual reaction to this was something else. I mean, they sponsored the County Hurdle last year, but they've gone on to sponsor the Champion Chase from 24 to 27. They become an official Jockey Club betting partner. And it was just met with complete negativity and derision.
Yes.
And it all stems from the fact they had a really bad time at Cheltenham last year when they were settling markets incorrectly, etc. And I spoke to somebody who's in the industry, and like I said, I do have some sympathy here because they are certainly not alone in missettling bets, etc. One person who's been in the industry for ages said, I've never seen a firm so badly set up for punters to get a bet on and get paid. Like I said, they've got a lot of money.
That's a low bar.
Maybe they just don't have somebody as charismatic and charming as Anthony Kaminska is fronting up.
I
felt really sorry for them. I felt really sorry for them. But like I said, they did have a bit of a car crash at the festival when they were a first-time sponsor last year. They got a lot of money. They chuck a lot of money at ambassadors and stuff. I think Meg Nichols is their front lady for UK.
Is it Chris Rock all over their advertising? He must have got an absolute fortune.
I think they've got who's that? Laura Woods, the face of football. She wouldn't have come cheap either. So they've got a lot of money. and hopefully they're improving because, like I said, it was just like people were saying, there were some wags were saying, isn't it? I mean, the Jockey Club betting partner, who's next? Fred West is doing the next grandstand.
Yeah, it was Chris Poole then, wasn't it?
And
William Hill have stepped in to pick up the county hurdle. I see as well. So it's all musical chairs at the moment as regards sponsorship. But from the Jockey Club, it's just important that they do have these big races sponsored in the cash position that they find themselves in, which is apparently not very good.
There was a time about 4 or 5 years ago when the Jockey Club racecourse and the Grand National were getting very sniffy about who sponsored their races. They said they'd rather it wasn't a bookmaker. But
good things change, huh?
Yeah, I mean, like I said,
beggars can't be choosers, Tony.
I know. Why is racing so? It just made me think. Why is racing so unattractive to non?
They're all. These people. They're all highfalutin types, and they think they're better than they are, and we're below them, and they need us, and it kills them.
Brian had some he had some interesting things to say about betting. This week, this was kind of an excerpt from an interview that he did on a wider scale about City of Troy next week and the Breeders' Cup. But it was, he came out swinging. I thought. I don't know. Maybe TC, you're a little bit cynical about some of the things he said, but I thought as a person who has such a standing in racing to come out and bat for the gambling industry at a time when they need every bit of help that they can get. I thought fair play to him, regardless of some of the things that he might have said, which you take with a pinch of salt. I thought fair play to him for standing up.
Yeah, he did make me laugh when he said someone with an addictive personality might get addicted to drinking tea, and I thought that was stretching it a little bit. But Aidan's not the first time he said this. He's very, very supportive of the World Pool and the Tote, etc. He's come out in favour of them in the past. So yeah, look, it makes sense. Like I say, some of the things he said just made me chuckle a bit. But yeah, it's.
But in terms of a wider thing here, he did mention some of the elderly generation now who go out and get the paper in the morning, they get the Racing Post, they sit down, they plan their racing for the day. They might go have their 10p, 50 lucky 15s or whatever it is, and it's a huge outlay for a lot of these people who rely on racing really for social life and for entertainment and stuff. And look, I know it might seem like a small thing, and it might say, well, look, it's easy for him to say that, but I thought it was a fair point, and I think now more than ever, any bit of support for this sport and the industry is a welcome.
I think just to add to you, the sponsorship thing becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you're in the marketing team of a company and you're trying to work out what sports to sponsor, you'd look at horse racing and watch it basically, flagellating itself over how desperate things are and how it can't get any sponsorship, and there's no money in the game, you can't do anything. You wouldn't be running in or jumping in with feet first in order to sponsor the sport, given the way it talks about itself, frankly, at the moment, which then just makes the problem bigger and bigger. I'm not really sure what you do about it. I don't think we help particularly on that front, but I don't know what you do about that.
Yeah, I think it's like this and the MGM thing. It's a good thing for horse racing. It's probably a good thing for MGM, because I would imagine that this might be the first sponsorship deal they do that's might be cost effective, given the Jockey Club problems. But I think the punter side of it is just the bad experiences people have had, like on a mass scale. And it's not just Cheltenham. It's not just Cheltenham last year, and everything's been rosy since then. I think it's people very, very frustrated, probably with the Americanization of not understanding the rules and the way we play bookmaker-wise, or the way we should play in the UK as well. So I'd imagine though the MGM from their point of view will get better at that, and they probably are slowly getting better at that. And it's good in the end for horse racing.
And like any business in gambling, I presume isn't exempt from this. AK, they probably flooded the market right heavily at the start to try and get the name out and get the perception of the brand and all that kind of stuff, and maybe weren't necessarily equipped to deal with the amount of customer base that they managed to take in, and sometimes that can happen, and it takes a while for everything to run smoothly.
Yeah, like even just from a gambling history point of view, the last firm that I can remember that operated in this way was probably Betway, when Betway came into the UK market, and they were horrendous originally as well, and they're probably a little bit better since then. So I think it's just kind of, you just throw as much SH1T at the wall, and some of it sticks, and then you build on whatever sticks, basically. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. A couple of other small stories to go through, and some of these are a bit heavy and legally heavy as well. So we're not going to go too far into it. You know, the story around Ballyhan Stud, Joe Foley and Steve Parkin are having a big protracted legal case now over the Stallion Sands of Mali and who owns the horse and who owns the stud fee rights for it. It's playing out in the High Court at the moment. It seems very messy. There's not a huge amount we can say, but if you read into the case, it doesn't look like either party are prepared to give an inch here. I think there's a proposal on the table at the moment. They just sell the horse itself and they divide whatever the value is 50-50 after this, but it does seem quite messy. Affidavits, you know, one party claiming to be owed 6 million in stud fees, not getting paid back out. It does seem a bit of a minefield at the moment. So look, it's one to keep an eye on and see where that settles. But I mean, go back to the Rocket Gibraltar case with Alex Ferguson. Like when these big juggernauts get their claws in, you know, they do not let go. And they're talking about egos as much as anything else, isn't it?
Yeah, but here, I mean, it's the decline of Clipper Logistics and Steve Parkin, really, because he was, but not so long ago, he was quite a big noise, and he's quite a controversial character. He made quite a lot of money from the PPE VIP lanes. I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think he's quite a big Tory donor, and so he's quite controversial like that. Put a lot of money into racing, sponsorship, etc. But I think Clipper Logistics and he is reining back quite a lot. So it's quite kind of like newsworthy in that regard as well. But I don't know the specifics of the case.
There's only one Steve Parkin, lads, the Rochdale manager from the mid-2000s that signed Grant Hull and Ricky Lambert, and we still couldn't get out of League Two. That's the original Steve Parkin.
Ricky Lambert, yes. Yeah. Good in, son.
Another lunatic. Another COVID lunatic.
I love Ricky Lambert. Love those lunatic heads. Yeah, himself, Duncan Ferguson, all those absolute headbangers. Right, quick story on Richard Hannon. So the Salario win back in 2020. This is 4 years now. Remember a horse called Etonian won the race. He subsequently tested positive for Tramadol, which is a prohibited race day substance, and then was found that Richard Hannon wasn't to be punished because he took all steps to try and prevent the horse from being contaminated from said substance. But he was also trying for the connections to keep the prize money. That did not work out in his favour. It's a bit of a messy one, this TC, isn't it?
I was just fascinated. One that, you know, it's 2024, and the horse won a Solari in 2020, so it took 4 years.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, and Harry might be you know, better placed to these. I kind of linked it with the recent Ed Dunlop case, where obviously trainers, you know, are actually running scared about, you know, getting fined and suspended for things outside of their control. But when I actually sent this through, and it was Anthony who actually flagged it up, Richard Hannon has 5 previous instances of Tramadol being found in his horses. So I just thought that was staggering. And one of those was a horse called Eugenio, who actually, the case is still ongoing from 2018. I mean, I know the George Gently case with Dan Skelton took 6 odd years, but an incident of Tramadol on a horse 6 years ago, you know, that case is still open according to the Racing Post. I find that absolutely staggering. Yeah. As the fact that Richard Hannon, if that story is true, this is the 6th occasion when a horse has been found with that that substance in.
I don't know much about Tramadol now, but Frankie Boyle's Frankie Boyle show is called Tramadol Nights, so I'd say it's fairly potent anyway.
But it's just on the point now. I mean, 6 years, 4 years, it's madness, isn't it?
I don't understand that, because presumably what you're investigating is the source of cross-contamination. Well, you would have thought that source might have disappeared over that period of time. The BHA continue to take too long to do investigations. A few years back, they agreed that they would sign up some kind of charter where they would try and do things more quickly and then tell people when investigations were over. They're slipping back. I do note that they are advertising for 2 regulatory lawyers at the moment. So it may be that they are currently slightly short-handed. But those ridiculous periods of time. the George Gently one seemed ridiculous as well. That seemed to be, they kind of stood back because there was litigation involved, and they didn't want, seem to not want to get involved in that. But those ridiculous periods of time. More broadly, I think the difference between Dunlop and Hanlon was that the panel found that he took all reasonable steps to stop cross-contamination, and I'm not sure they did find that in Dunlop. So it's a two-limb test in these cases. One is it there? Is the substance there? Two is, did you take all reasonable steps to avoid the cross-contamination? I'm unaware of the BHA ever accepting, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, ever accepting when they charge the trainer for this that they did take all reasonable steps. I think they always say, certainly in my experience, that the trainer didn't take all reasonable steps. But sometimes the panel takes a different view and finds that they did. I still think it's a really uncomfortable making rule, this, which is it's a strict liability rule. Trainers are done one way or another, regardless of whether the horse is in. And actually, what would worry me most about these 6 instances is one perfectly plausible explanation for me is some rogue employee doing this for whatever reason, or someone else with access to the yard. And I still think that's a real problem. These are not hermetically sealed environments, these yards, and nor indeed racetracks, where the boxes very often are not properly cleaned on occasion are not properly cleaned and that sort of thing. And I still think the strict liability thing on trainers is very uncomfortable making, not least because it's a real disincentive for the BHA to get to the bottom of what happened, because they can just go, well, we know who to blame.
Yeah, and they did make clear in this particular case that Richard Hanlon had taken all reasonable precautions to ensure that the horse wasn't infected. So it does come back to that. There's very much the hallmarks of that Ed Dunlop case as well. I totally agree with you. But as you say, it's interesting. We'll see what happens. I should mention Petrolhead. If you were backing the anti-post favourite, well, it was a big tumble overnight, really, in the Galway Hurdle last summer. The horse was withdrawn on the morning. You'll remember Katie Brown trains the horse, formerly owned by Ronan McNally. The Irish body withdrew the horse on the morning of, and he subsequently tested positive for clenbuterol in the care of his owner. So that was the reason why the horse was withdrawal. It's taken this long to get down to the substance and the actual revealing of what the substance was. But yeah, it's a bit of a messy one, this, given McNally previously owned it. The whole big gamble overnight, the horse tested positive. Bit of a mess. We're not going to go too far into it. Right. Okay. I think we've get on to our questions, guys, if we can, before we wrap it up for this week. Mediocre Gambler wants to know, what value, if any, does having a podcast add to the AK Bets brand? Same goes with Betfair, Paddy Power, etc. Is it purely a PR move, or does it actually generate revenue? Well, I know you've had a huge amount of female subscription uptake since I've come on board, AK, and your female fan base is through the roof. But is there any other reason why you've decided to?
It's what I'd say is it's hard to measure, but it's I'm a bit of a narcissist in these instances. I see something that I like, and in the case of some people on this podcast, it stopped, and I thought it'd be a good idea to get it going because I enjoyed the output previously, and and I try and, like I say, a bit of a narcissist. I try and make things that I'd want to listen to myself, I think, and how that translates into business for the website. I think we've seen the numbers for this pod in particular grow and keep growing, and it's hard to just attribute what it adds, I think, but I'm very happy with it and how it's going, shall we say.
Right. Okay.
I think Grumpy Old Men would be a bigger uptick than the female version, wasn't it?
Yeah, Grumpy Old Men and Problem Gamblers, coming on to listen to me. David Brown says, is Meg Nichols the most annoying pundit in TV? This is quite a firm view from David Brown. If ever there was an example of someone being fast-tracked due to her family, she is it. Makes me turn off ITV Racing. Also, have you seen the state of that £20 challenge? No winners for 9 weeks. I repeat, 9. They need a full-time expert on. Yeah, look, strong views there. I mean, look, God, I mean, I think that's a bit harsh on Meg. I understand if you don't particularly like what she does, but you know, obviously they feel ITV feel she has a value. TC, strong views there.
I do think it's unfair. I mean, when I don't listen to much racing TV. In fact, she was getting some criticism on Twitter about her appearance on Racing TV on Friday. So I do think it's kind of like unfair to single them out. Everyone's got pundits they like and don't like. Whenever I've seen her and listened to her, she's done her homework, which a lot of people don't do, especially like middle-aged, white men who don't get the criticism. I can tell you a lot of people on TV who don't do half the work she appears to do. So I think it's unfair there. I think this was all born on the back of quite a cringy interview that Ollie Bell did with her just after her cousin Harry Durham, Gimme 5 won.
Oh yeah, his first Cheltenham winner. Yeah.
And but it was only a Class 1 hurdle. It wasn't a Cheltenham Festival win, and she was getting kind of like tearful, and she sourced the horse as well, so it was a bit of a hashtag ad as well. And I just thought it was really out of place. I thought that was a mistake by the producer getting her involved, and I think it painted her and Ollie in quite a bad light because it was cringy, it was self-indulgent, and they were actually doing the interview when the horses were going in for a Group 3 at Newbury. So I think it was misplaced, but I think direct your criticism of that towards the producer rather than her, unless she said, like, get me on. But no, like I said, I think there's a lot of sexism in the criticism of Meghan. Like I said, I'm neither here nor there on that, and that's the case with most pundits because I don't listen enough. But yeah, I think sexism is at play there. I don't think she's anywhere near as bad as.
And I guess you can't expect people to be all things to all people. Like, she has a role there. It's a very definitive role, I think, and I've listened to her as well. As say, she knows her stuff. She's done her homework. Like, it's a very definitive role that she has. And
also, as you pointed out, I mean, just because she's a trainer's daughter, I mean, she's an ex-jockey herself. I mean, you could level that kind of like,
And everyone in the racing industry.
Like on ITV, the vast majority, bar Richard Hoyles, Rishi Prasad, I mean, the vast majority are all ex-jockeys anyway, Adele, etc. So no, I think that question's unfair, but she does come in for some stick, but like I said, I think that's set.
Well, just to add to that then.
Yeah, whenever I listen to it, you're never standing out, but you're never thinking, it's the same with all of them, I suppose, but you're never thinking, what are you on about here? Like, again, it's horses for courses, but nothing she puts out I have any particular problem with. Echo everything Tony says there. I'd say just that stuff the other day probably was misplaced, but it's probably, again, not of her doing. And if you get a chance to talk about sourcing and horse yourself on ITV, why are you not going to do it? Not do it. She's no
Daniel Sturridge on Sky Sports football coverage, I can tell you that. Anyway, she's holds around. Graham says, as the ITV pundits sponsored by bookmakers the last 9 weeks, they haven't had one charity bet winner. This is on the board. Dreadful tipping by so-called experts. Yeah. Look, I did notice this. I find it pretty funny, to be honest with you. And one guy on Twitter, I think his name is Samuel the Cat, off memory, and he calls it sadly another 5 losses for ITV racing pundits this week. It's pretty funny at this stage. But yeah, I take your point. I'm
saying nothing. Although I did stop the rot on Sunday.
Yes, well done, my man. Another 40 of those, and you're back to level 5.
Don't follow tipsters. Do your own work.
Chris Fawcett says, a final question: do the panel believe that since affordability checks came in back in 2020, some big core brands have introduced departments dedicated to avoid paying out? Gambling commissions say they get 2,000 complaints a year about this, and I imagine most people don't complain to the gambling commission. Anyone want to take this before we leave it?
You want some Harry? Huh?
Actually, I don't. In a shock answer, Chris, no, I don't think it was affordability checks particularly. I think it was going on a lot longer before that. We've explored this, AK and I, in the previous podcast. He's crossed Rubicon now. He's a bookmaker, and he's got to. He wears a different hat nowadays. Look, we're never going to get stats that show to what extent this happens because the bookmakers aren't mad enough to keep them, and the gambling commission doesn't make them keep them such stats. But so everything is anecdotal. But anecdotally, it has happened quite a lot. Potentially happening less now, but it's happened quite a lot over the years that punters for small stakes have been excluded using KYC requirements just because there was a concern that they weren't the kind of punter that the algorithm wanted. That's been my experience.
Okay, all right.
Hold on a minute. I'm going back on that a second. What I would say is I think we broadly agree again on all this stuff, and what I'm saying is I've never seen that in the industry, and I don't know how compliance and customer services works in big operators, even operators that I've worked for. What I can say is categorically that nowhere I've worked for has ever, a trading guy has ever gone, get me a document there so I can stop paying this guy out. Like from a trade, I suppose I've always been trading. And
I think that's the thing. I was thinking about that, okay, and I think that is the thing, is that you were a trader, and you're probably right that in the trading room there's a more philosophical approach to this. But there are definitely middlemen in between compliance and traders at big books whose job it is to try and find ways to get out of these bets, and they're called very silly things in my view, like loss prevention department.
Listen, I'm aware of a loss prevention department in somewhere I worked, but what I would also say is let's get some evidence of it if it's occurring. The turnover of staff in these companies, most of these big operators that have merged and stuff like that have made a lot of people redundant. I just don't get why no one's ever blown the whistle on this if this is a thing. What I personally would like to know more about and see stats published are bookmakers, big bookmakers that to get a payout off a customer, make them sign NDAs. I'd be like, how many NDAs have you had to force punters to sign to get money out of? Because I think that is quite prevalent and it's not spoken about enough. So I'm not doing this as a defense of bookmakers. I'm just saying that I haven't seen it in my experience.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. On that bombshell, we will leave it. We'll leave it for this week. Download the AK Bets app for all the latest sporting offers and racing prices as well. City of Troy will win in Del Mar next week. You heard it here first. He's going to do it. We're all off to put all our money on Kamala Harris to win the US presidential election, unless, of course, Constitution Hill doesn't agree. We'll get the latest from Nicky Henderson and Seven Barrows after his racecourse gallop this week. Until next week, my friends, take it easy.